name is Cassandra Kessler. I'm a teacher, as you saw in the EAA, of Michigan, which is a turnaround district that just took over some of the lowest performing schools in the state. So I am a first-year teacher, and I am a high school teacher, not a high school student. I get that all the time. I think I've been asked 20 times, oh, are you a student speaker? I'm like, no, I'm a teacher, so I teach. So like you saw in that video, my classroom is totally student-centered, which means that the students have choice on how they learn what they learn. They get to move at their own pace. And they have ownership of what they're learning and what they're doing. So if you came in my classroom today, which my students are still there, we go 11 months. So if you came into my classroom today, you'd see lots of different things going on. You'd see some students who, like I said in that video, would still be on Unit 1 because they're working at a slower pace. But you'd see some students who are, I think I have 5 units open right now. So you'd see students watching videos because they like to watch videos either from Khan Academy or Compass. There's lots of videos they watch. You'd see students who were doing readings. You'd see students who were doing project-based learning. So you'd see lots of different things going on. And so it sounds really easy. Every time I say it, they're like, that's awesome, but it wasn't the quickest of transitions. So I kind of want to tell you about how I started. So I graduated from Grand Valley State University, which is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, last year. And I moved back home. I was born and raised in Detroit. And I felt like, I'm going to go back to Detroit and I'm going to make a difference there. I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 5 years old. I was like, I'm going to go back. And I heard about the EAA, and I was like, this is my opportunity to make that difference I've always wanted to make. So I got my job with the EAA, and the EAA said, we're student-centered. That's what we're doing. So I was like, okay. I learned about it in PD, and I was like, I can do this. This sounds great. And then we kind of got started with school, and all my hopes and dreams kind of started to fall apart when I saw my students who were way more concerned about fighting or being in the hallway or, what can I do? Can I have my packet for the year so I can get it done and pass? So I was like, oh no. And then we started getting all these naysayers, teachers who were like, this can't work in the high school. You're never going to be able to do it. And I kind of started to fall into that. But then, a couple weeks into school, I was like, you know what? I can do this. I can make it work. I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 5. This is what I want to do. So I was like, I'm going to do it. I was determined, and my overachiever inside myself kind of came out, and I was like, we're going to do it. So I started using my prep period to meet, you saw her at the end of the video, my instructional coach, and I just started meeting with her every day on my prep, and I was like, how can we roll this out? And we just started talking about it, ways we could do it, how we could get it started. So we started pretty small. We started with just giving the students 2 choices of things they could work on. So, I had an objective, we call them learning targets, and we make them I can statements. So I had an I can statement that we were going to work on that day, and they had 2 ways they could do it. So that's how we started, really simple. They had 2 choices, and then I had a timer up on my board, and they had so much time to do it. So it's kind of trying to gradually put them in that they could pick how they were gonna learn it, but they still had to, follow some sort of pace. So that's how we started, just, 2 choices for a couple of days, and then I added a 3rd choice, and then I added a 4th choice, and then we kind of went from there. And so as we started doing that, I started really working with the students. What of these things do you like? What don't you like? What ideas do you have? How can we make this better? And once I started talking to the students, I got the student buy-in that I needed for them to kind of change their mindset on school. So once the students started telling me, they were like, oh, she's listening. Okay, I'll do what she says. So it kind of just started, rolling out from there. Then, as you saw when we started, in October, I just started putting stations out, and we would do it on a weekly basis. So every week, maybe I put 6 stations or 8 stations, but they were new that they had to finish 4 of them by the end of the week. So they had their little menu. I would give them a menu with all 8 choices. I wrote on the top how many they had to achieve for that week. And they would go to work starting Monday. They would track themselves through those stations. And then at the end of the week, we'd have some sort of assessment on it. So that's how we started. And then as we kind of started going from there, other teachers started trying to figure out what I was doing. Because I had students who were telling their other teachers, like, well, in Miss Kessler's class, we don't have to listen to her lecture. And they were like, how does she teach you? And they were like, oh, well, in Miss Kessler's class, we get to watch a video, or we can do a reading, or we can go, find our own video, or we can do a web quest. And they were like, okay. So I started getting all these other teachers who started coming to my room and trying to figure out what I was doing. And then all these teachers started coming in, and the thing I would hear the most was, that student does no work in my class. How are they doing work in here? And I told them, I was like, you have to give them choice. You have to. Because that student that you're lecturing every day doesn't want to hear that. But the second you give them a video that has like some character in it, or make, something that they like, my sports players, if I could find any videos that, even if it was talking about government, but there was just a basketball in it, like they bought right in. They were like, oh my gosh, like, so they bought right in. So the teachers at my school, we kind of started collaborating. So then it was easier to really roll out student-centered learning, because when we would collaborate, we could, instead of me trying everything and finding out like what works and doesn't work, other teachers were trying things, so we could start talking and saying, that I tried this today, it's not really working. Or I tried this and it really worked. And then now the students started to see it in all of their classrooms. So it wasn't just one classroom that they were doing something different in, it was now all of their classrooms that they were doing something different in. Which was, there's no words to really describe it, but phenomenal. Because the student turnaround that we've been seeing in our school, due to student-centered learning is, just phenomenal. As we started going through and they started, doing stations, and we were calling them centers in every class, we started to transition from that, as you can see in the video. So that was kind of my challenge to my students when we got to the end of the semester and we were switching from government to economics. And I said to my students, like, I know you guys like all the choice you're given, and I know you guys like these things, but we're going to try something else. So I was like, starting with economics, when the semester changes, you're going to get to move like 100% at your own pace through economics. And some of my students were like, really? So that means I can do nothing? And I was like, I guess if that's what you want, you could do nothing. And I said, we're going to put up, and I put up just a simple Excel sheet with all their names and all their assignments up on in my classroom. And I said, as you complete assignments, you're going to track yourself through your work. But everyone's going to be able to see where you are at all times. And everyone was like, oh, okay, maybe I will do some work. So we started that in economics. Like I said, I teach government, so we do government first semester, and we switched to economics. And the change I saw in my students when they got to track their own progress for the whole class to see, and they got to move at their own pace is, it's why I became a teacher. It's why I, became an educator. I had students who just, they liked their centers before, but they really, if I said do 4, they were only doing 2, and they still weren't working to their full potential. But I saw students who they just changed when they had, more time to work on their writing assignment because they struggled with writing, but, they can do their vocabulary like that quick and they don't need that much time. They were so happy. I had this student, Dion. He was that typical apathetic student that we've all had that just wouldn't do anything. And I talked to everyone. The 10th grade PLC was meeting constantly, and we're like, what are we going to do? And he was a constant talk. And the first week that we did the tracking with the students, Dion was the first one done with the first unit. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I would talk to the teacher next to me, and I was like, Dion was the first one done, and it was really good. Like, I can't believe it. And I sat with him and I was talking to him and I'm like, why? Like, what motivated you to do this? And he said exactly what I couldn't believe it. He said numerous things, but he said, A, because I'm very competitive. Ooh, sorry. And I was like, oh, okay, that works. But he said, because he got to move 100% at his own pace. There was no one forcing him to do it, and there was no one telling him he had to do it or how he had to do it or what he had to do. And he said because he got to choose and because he got to track, his own progress, he felt, really invested in it. And I was like, okay, like we're onto something. The growth that my students have shown through, this new model is, amazing. I think for economics, the math teacher and I, we split our the math targets in half. So to kind of take a load off, I fit whatever I could fit into economics. So all the learning targets I had to do with slope or graphing or everything, I took responsibility for, and then he took the other ones. And from September to April, the end of April, 70% of the 10th graders at my school showed met their target growth, which means in just 1 year, or a little under a year, they grew at least 1.5 years in their testing. So, yeah, and there was, I can't remember now the percents off the top of my head, but there was another chunk that made 2 years growth, and then there was a small chunk, but there was a small chunk that made 3 years growth in 1 year. So, it's transformative. My students are feeling success in school that they've never felt before. My students used to tell me all the time how their teachers would tell them if they were quiet, they would pass. Or, they wouldn't do work all year, but at the end, they would, right before finals, they would ask for their packet. And then if they finished the packet, they passed. And I was like, I knew like what we were going into was bad, but I didn't imagine that at all. And I was in shock. I was like, you just pass? And they were like, yeah, if we did the packet at the end, then we passed. Or if we were quiet, or whatever the teacher asked. And, they were never really pushed. And so my students are now, like I said, they're seeing success in school that they've never seen before. They're actually learning things. They're remembering things. They can tell me things. And, they're always ready. I'm always walking around like, okay, talk to me about slope, or talk to me about the business cycle, or talk to me about your supply and demand graph. Like, I'll ask a question, and they're always ready for it. And the students have told me, they've never really been expected to remember what they're learning, or they've never been held accountable for it before. So it's changing them. For these students to feel the success that they've felt in school, it's life-changing for them. I have students who said they never thought college was an option until this year. I have students who said, like, the success in school, makes them feel confident. They feel successful in so many other things. So for me, that's like why we're here. That's what we're doing. So, it's amazing. It's phenomenal. Student-centered is definitely changing my classroom. It's changing my school. It's changing my students. And it's just life-changing. So thank you.